And I think we are live. And it's always a question. Am I between an alive qubit or a dead qubit when I start? Or am I in or am I
Oh,
alive? I
wow.
mean, it's a bit of
Gee.
entanglement. That's it. So I'm Alexandre Blanc, work at VARS, strategical and security advisor. You know me, it's like the episode 9 of Dash of Cyber. Welcome everybody on board. Rod, your turn.
Rod Lewis, the OK Network, cybersecurity consulting, among other things. But love sitting with these guys and as Alexander says, have these barbecue chats. So it's going to be educational for me on the quantum side as well too. But have some stuff to share and hopefully learn a lot from John.
Brad, yourself.
Absolutely. So, hey, everybody, Brad Rhodes, Accenture Federal, U.S. Army Reserve, and I teach at a couple of places at the graduate level. And it's ironic that we're having this conversation. I was talking with my students last night in one of my basic cybersecurity courses, and they asked about quantum computing. And I said, it just so happens I'll be having some conversations with some folks tomorrow. So hopefully you'll tune in. But yeah, I will say the one thing I'll say with quantum computing is this. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors right now out there. There's a lot of, unknowns with quantum computing. And there's a lot of folks out there that are trying to sell stuff, to be quote unquote quantum proof. Yet we don't actually have truly functional quantum computing yet. And so how can you be quantum proof if you can't actually test it against a quantum computer? But I'm very interested to hear what John has to say and learn and have our usual witty repartee about all this stuff and hopefully make it fun for our listeners.
John, your
Good,
word.
Good morning. Do you want me to answer the question?
You could just jump on in. Let's do it. Let's just go, John.
So the answer to your question is there are ways of testing, training, and manipulating data. So companies like D-Wave, IBM, and things like that, they have functionally quantum computers out on the market now. You can rent time to do testing. There are several national labs that have high-end simulators that run the same concept of a quantum computer and gives you the same theoretical possibilities of it. But most of our stuff that we have actually gone through not only just national labs, but it actually been sent to places that have quantum computer and testing. So there is a way to be quantum safe. Please don't use the word quantum proof. Nothing is perfect. Okay, so let's be honest. You have quantum safe technologies, you have post quantum safe technologies, and those are the two things you need to understand. If somebody's telling you they're quantum proofing it, they're giving you smokes and mirrors, as you say. If you're legit and you're a true company, then it is quantum safe. Because quantum computers are changing rapidly. So if you go 3 years ago, we were introducing to 200, 250 qubits. Now we're up to 4,000 qubits, and we have Google has announced that not only they're going to do over 4,000, they plan on probably making 10,000 by 2050, which seems like a long time away, but you think 3 years ago we were talking quantum computers to be here in 5 to 10 years. And 3 years, we've gone from just 200 to 4,000 qubit quantum computers that are actually live fed.
And that's the information we have on our side of the planet. I mean, in the US and America, North America. So,
but
go ahead.
I was going to say, that's true. That's on America's soil that we know about. That doesn't include what China, because we don't know what all China has. We don't know what Russia has. We don't have North Korea. These are only what we know that's out there.
Yeah, because we saw in the news in a couple of past weeks, and that China have sent a Quantum satellite, which we don't know what it claims to be, what it's the capability of it. But I mean, they are definitely playing in the field. Is it real? Is it fake? We don't know. But I mean, this is brewing. And maybe we can get back to the definition. Why do we speak about quantum? What's the change in words that English words that most people know, as cybersecurity or even people in SMBs? What's the big deal? Well, and we're gonna go between each others about what's the big deal of it. I think it's a good thing. So I'm gonna start on this one. On my end, I did learn about that seeing a demonstration of Microsoft team that was working on post-quantum encryption open source project that was based on OpenVPN, and they did try to implement actually OpenVPN with a cipher that's supposed to be quantum proof, which didn't use any mathematical calculation that would be exposed to the quantum capabilities. So that's when I learned about it, and then I wonder why they did that. And I realized that the threat was already active on the current situation because there is this kind of attack called record now, decrypt later, which is basically, dump all the traffic that's happening right now, which is encrypted with the current ciphers. And I mean, it's also a time attack, it already happens. You don't need computing. You don't need quantum computing to achieve that. But the extent of capabilities of quantum computing against existing cipher make it a big deal. So basically today we are all connected to the net, working from home, speaking to the cloud machines, and this communication can be recorded. Fine, today it's encrypted, we cannot read it. But when quantum computing comes to be real with an application able to break these ciphers, that means that people will be able to decrypt these net flows and read it. So if you send something today that has a lifetime of 100 years, let's say industrial systems, that's the threat because it's going to be still a real thing, like a nuclear plant or something, in 50 years, when John will have a fully running quantum computer at home and we'll be able to isolate and locate each and every flow. So that's one first thing. And being a privacy guy, it's also extremely scary because we're totally naked in front of the threat that is already there, but not there yet. So that would be my take. Brad, maybe on this one, what's your take on the stuff?
Yeah, it's very true. There's a lot. There has been, over the last 5 years, significant threat actors out there stealing data, putting it, on a data farm somewhere, and just waiting, because eventually we're going to get to the point where encryption, even the high, RSA 4096-bit encryption, is gonna be crackable. And it's only and John, I think you touched on this already. It's only a matter of time, right? And we see these leaps in technology and processor capabilities and stuff like that. And I know that equivalent, right? We're gonna see those leaps in quantum as well. And so getting to the idea of being quantum safe, you really need to think about that. You need to think about that if somebody gets into your enterprise, takes your data, right, and you don't ever see it, show up on the dark web, it's probably because they actually can't do anything with it yet. And that's kind of scary, because when you think about, like, it's almost like a retroactive attack against data that's already been taken, by threat actors, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that is everybody talks about the crypto piece and the leaps and bounds and how safe are the algorithms that we have and and I think that's the one that's out there. But I think the other piece is the whole concept of quantum machine learning and the ability to crunch data at a very high rate, right? And so when you start thinking of all those pockets of data that people have been collecting for years of personal data and everybody else's data, you can all of a sudden be able to turn that into like gold, just because you now have the computing and not the linear computing, but the multi-plane computing that you see with quantum. That's huge. Right.
Yeah, and that's assuming the cloud did not leak it all until then.
And we're back to the cloud.
Yeah, always.
So John, and I was going to say, and John, and maybe you can start with, because again, like when most people, when they hear qubit, right, their eyes glaze over. They go, oh, right, and so yeah, exactly, right. So bits are zeros and ones, right? And as I've explained to people, a qubit, which resides in the quantum realm, right, is multiple states. So it could be a 0, it could be a 1, it could be a -1, it could be a 0, a 0.1. It could be lots of things, lots of states. So maybe you can start and talk a little bit about, what exactly a qubit means, from that. Because again,
Right.
not everybody's got a background in particle
Yeah.
physics and understands this whole idea, superstring theory,
Yeah.
this, all the stuff that goes with that. And it's awesome and it's fascinating. I think I've got that book around here somewhere. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what exactly does a qubit mean when we talk about it in comparison to our standard bit in computing.
Okay. So first of all, the attacks that you guys are talking about where they collect the data now and crack it later is called harvesting. The harvesting attacks are actually happening now as we speak. Companies will get their data harvested and will send to another country, and they will try to run it. We've seen attacks of like this nature already against a supercomputer, and supposedly haven't actually seen it firsthand, but it go against a quantum computer to break it. Standard 128 AES and RSA 128, it's already done for. I can tell you that personally, it's done for. So if you've got anything that runs 128, you might as well consider it as plain text. Now, come to where you're at, qubits. Everybody understands the theorem of a light bulb, right? You turn 1 on, turn 2, and that's on, 0 is off. We all get that. And when you talk about qubits, that it has many stages, I try to teach it to like I teach my 4-year-old. Think of a dimmer switch. You have on and you have off. And in between the dimmer switch, you have hundreds and thousands of different possibilities. Now imagine that dimmer switch going the opposite way too, from 0 off to where you have negative, where you give your power company the power. So you can either take power from them or give them power. And the concept of a qubit, it can be that way. And that's the way I describe it to my 4-year-old, because she understands literal stuff. And so I want to teach people literal stuff. But the breakdown is as simple as what we do. 8 qubits equals 1 bit. Okay, 8 bits equals a byte. The mathematics stays there the same. But what's interesting is a qubit can be 1, it can be 0, or it can be anything in between. No questions at all, nothing. And if you have 8 qubits, you literally have 0 to 1, 9, A to F. It can literally have anything you want. All the letters of the alphabet or all the numbers in the world. And so you literally take 8 bits to go against a byte. So if you're really got something that's only 16 bytes, you only need 32 qubits and it cracks it. It will crack it in a heartbeat. So when you think of the linear of it, it's a smaller form of a byte, and it goes against a byte. And then it can manipulate whatever it wants. The best movies, you guys remember the movie Hackers, where they have that thing that dials against the numbers over and over until it finds the numbers? Think of a qubit doing the same thing. Just spit it out. Oh, this works. This turns on. This turns on. This turns on. And then, again, that's the way I describe it to my 4-year-old. Is it works linear. It can work lunar too. So it covers many aspects of it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, go ahead.
So I was going to say, okay, so I mean, 1 qubit, infinite states between 0 and 1. So that I think makes really good sense. So the question is, right, John, how many qubits does it take to make a viable quantum computer? Do you only need 1 qubit, or is there like a threshold that says if I've got 10 qubits, I'm going to be able to do some cool stuff? If I've got 100 qubits, what is viability, in terms of quantum computing? So
in quantum computer, 10 qubits. All right. So they first started out like 10, 12 qubits, small. They were able to produce some data results at that small of a stage. And then, we learned that, just like we learned 16, 32 bits, we learned qubits need to work in the same concept. You got to have the same amount. And so that we went up that way. But what was interesting is the qubits technology, it didn't matter how many you had, didn't ever change. Now, And this theory was brought to, and I know what your question is, but this is the cool aspect. Whether it was made out of diamonds, whether it was made out of copper, or whether it was made out of liquid, it never changed the effect of it. So the qubits themselves just read what we give them right now and produce an ability. And unlike a supercomputer, where if we change the different types of processor, we're going to get a different setup. We didn't get the same results we thought in that aspect with a quantum computer. So there's really no telling. As long as you've got something that it can read, 10 qubits was the smallest I remember seeing that produced a large amount of data. I mean, it didn't produce, no, here's the end of the world scenario if we all don't stop eating cheeseburgers, but it gave us some theories out of medical. So,
But you touched on one thing, the whole concept of supercomputers. So people confuse supercomputers and quantum computing. And so
yes.
if you can touch on the difference between the two.
Okay, so a supercomputer still can only read ones and zeros. That's the big thing. It still reads in binary. It just reads a lot of binary very fast. A quantum computer is, reads in the qubit level. It reads everything at one given time. And so it can read your positives, your negatives, your yes, your no's. And the only way we get an answer out is we go in there, we freeze it for that instance, and then that gives us an answer, and then that's how we produce it. Versus a binary computer, it's going to produce an answer because it has to produce an answer. A quantum computer doesn't have to produce an answer. We've actually proven, there's been many times that they put in data that it has no real results, because it's to them, there's no results to that quantum computer. But if you put the same mathematical equation in a binary computer, it tries to produce a result no matter what. So there's the two biggest difference. The next biggest difference is in quantum, you're using protons, neutrons, and electrons to get an answer. And then if you need to fuse or tailgate two of them or group two of them to come up with an answer, you can pull it from different places to create entanglement, and that entanglement can give you a different result without the entanglement. So there's a lot of ability changed in that aspect of it too.
And that raises a question. Given the result might change, given the way you read or interpret the value, if you consider the entanglement, which is basically what the average value between two qubits in a way, how do we have accurate results? How do we know the integrity of the calculation? Because it's a brand new science, so I was curious about that.
The first steps that they did, basics, they learn basic stuff through the trial and error. And it's a form. So if you think of string theory, you've got your sound waves that go back and forth. And when you stop that string theory at a certain point, whether it's a high or a low frequency, you have an answer. And if you take multiple strings across that string theory and you get them, and then they conclude where they bounce together and then they form a wavelength, or they drop together to the bottom and they get a sublength, but where they can collide together, they form an answer. And so what we do is we take the theory of it and we bounce it across all these atoms, and then we freeze it like we do with the string theory. We're stopping that soundboard where we want to see that's at, and then that's how we get our answers. And what they did is they did small tests. It was 2 + 2 = what? 4. They did things like that. Then they started adding more complex things. What is E = MC? And then, keep going off that until we got to things. Now, is it accurate? It is 90. The average is about 95% accuracy. Yes, there's 5% errors. And every day they come out with a new algorithm or a new frequency to get it closer and closer. They say probably by the end of 2025, we will exceed 99% accuracy in this connectivity. And it's not that it falls down short or that we're less right now than anything. It's that we are growing in this field faster than we've grown in any other field. As I told the person, we're in the 80s of the original computer. You know, we had individual quantum computers. In the 80s, we had individual computers. We have started working on networking things. So universities have started quantum-based network technologies to start networking computers. You know, at the late 80s, we were doing the same thing, trying to figure out how to network multiple computers to go through. So it's coming. It's just we're repeating ourselves in a more advanced scenario.
Interesting.
That's very interesting. Someone asked a question there. And I don't know, it's Kara, she asked,
Oh, that's a good question.
Can you please explain how the key works, QKD and QRNG? So that, to me, mean nothings. So I hope it means something for you, I hope.
I thought you were just about to answer.
My reading was not deep enough, or I didn't remember this one. I was like, that's going to be for John.
So QKD is quantum key differentiation. So kind of like we do today with standard keys, you know, we have asymmetric and symmetrics and multiple formats of other keys. Quantum's developing in the same realm. We still use the same technology as asymmetric and things like that. So when we're talking about key distribution, we're talking about how those keys work with random number space and things. And so with side of it, we don't technically use the same aspect that we normally do. In our crypto world, to safe key distribution or a key cipher has the ability to go one way more than multiple ways right now. And so we are working on that. Most places are. I know Verizon and things like that are working on that aspect. But it's going to use the same technologies we use right now for standard key distribution.
Yeah, very nice. Actually, this is aligned with what Dennis was commenting, that I did highlight, like Q is, I mean, that makes sense to me. I understand that is aligned with what you're saying. Q is statistical probabilities of an outcome where a qubit can be any of all values. So that's the big shift. So basically, and also, you know, when I had this question, when you say the quantum computing is evolving right now, I think this is a physical evolution of the computer, because there are two sides of things. There is the programming side, and what I was wondering, you know, what do the coders do right now? How do you know how to code? What language is used to control a quantum computer to get results via the physical alteration of it? So I was wondering that where do we stand today?
Yeah, I was reading that today as well too on the IBM. IBM has you can rent time on their quantum cloud, but there's a whole specific way to program developers. Yeah.
So IBM has their own language. Microsoft has their own language. D-Wave has their own language. There's multiple languages to program a quantum computer. There is actually a class on LinkedIn that you can take that teaches you how to program. You have to, it's unique how it writes, because you have to write on the qubit level versus, you know, the ones and the zeros. I do see it going to be coming kind of like we are today, where you have a developer. Not only can they code in Java, but they can code in Rail, they can code in, you know, Ruby or things like that. So with each of them coming out as their own thing, and businesses can't afford their own, so they have to rent time, they're going to have to get developers to write into language for that company that they're going to be doing with.
So basically, that's kind of a framework that the company that provide the quantum computing brings with function and calls.
Yes.
But we don't get to write, like, you know, there was assembly for the x86, we would handle the register and all. That's not something that would be that open in the quantum world, because somehow it's an overlay of an overlay, if I understand well. I mean, it's not humanly doable to handle that thing down at that level, at the kind of CPU level.
Yeah, we don't write that level yet. We're not there yet. We will be, probably in our lifetime. Yes, as fast as we're going and changing, it will be that we could write that level. But right now, we use machines to write to machines, and that's the way it works. I mean, we put in a code to a regular computer. It translates for into qubits and then runs on the quantum computer, and then it produces your answer.
Can you
This is
can you
sorry, go ahead, Rod.
I'm sorry. Can you explain that step? You're the machine.
So when
you hand off to the quantum computer.
Yeah, so humans naturally can't write into quantum level. So we use a machine that does it. So if you go to like D-Wave, and yes, I bring them up because they own multiple quantum computers like IBM, and they were the first one to market with things. So they have in front of each quantum computer, they have a standard computer there. And so when you write your code, that standard computer reads that code and sends the information to the quantum computer. And then once they get the answer from the quantum computer, it comes back to the standard computer and it's converted from that code back into a code that we can understand. So when you look at Microsoft's or IBM's codes, they have unique symbols in there and other letters that we don't typically understand, but the quantum computer does. So we can write the code out what we see and think makes sense, and it's translated to that language on the other side.
So it's like a compiler after all, because we compile for CPU, so we compile. But I believe, my understanding is like we compile for a language that goes in a framework in a way, because there is already a sub layer. And as you said, we are going to go deeper. And that's funny because as we grow, we're going to discover the capability of it. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, that's our favorite topic. That means that we are building a contextual attack surface that we do not understand yet.
Yeah. We are building faster than what we can understand by all means. And it's becoming more and more dangerous every day. And I know it's we're going to scare you type thing. But in the aspect, it's not just one thing that quantum computers, it's not just going to be harvest attacks. It's not just going to be a key distribution. It's not going to be just, trying to collect data. I mean, we use it right now. IBM bought multiple hospitals so that way they can produce medical data through their quantum computers. And, that's a risk to your health. That's a risk to your information, because now if that data isn't stored correctly, that's on that quantum computer and somebody copies it, it can be exposed. I mean, but, at the same time, we have everyday standards where we have to do that. And there are no standards or regulations right now that are held to at the quantum level.
True.
So,
and you bring a point, you said we store data. So that's a curious point as well that I didn't read much about that, because we speak a lot about processing the data, input and output. But is there a switch in the way we store? Because the storage is binary, it's 0 and 1. So what's the impact on the storage for qubit? Can we store qubit configuration? Because I don't think we can save the data. It's just like, go ahead.
The data is not. It's the output of the data that we have to store. Yes, the data inside it while it's running live is not at the means right this second. But the fact that the quantum computer produces it to a binary, and that binary computer is technically a independent nature because it's connected to the quantum, we have a risk there. We have a large risk there. But what I was talking about is, as we develop these quantum clouds and these quantum storage clouds that people are going to things, we have nothing there. We have to think about how to store that data and how to understand that data that's actually stored, as you say, in the cloud. And as we come back to that.
But yeah, if we're talking machine learning and AI in quantum, you have the same potential data exposure issues, right? You've got to train it with models. You got to feed it with data, and that data can have PII, can have anything in it. So I think essentially the same, just a different metaphor.
Yeah, and those data, believe it or not, the AI groups that are running rampant right now using quantum are trying to use quantum technologies or get the money to build a small quantum computer to run their AI. It literally is going to produce almost significantly human feelings towards that, because it's going to be able not to do just, hey, look, I feel happy, I feel sad. It's going to be able to say, I don't feel like myself because I have this multiple issues today. You know, my processor doesn't feel like it's running right, but yet my heater coil doesn't feel like this. It's not going to say, I feel bad because of this. It's going to give you that feeling like we do today.
So what you're saying is the HAL 9000 from 2001 was likely a quantum computer. This is what I'm hearing. I finally made the connection there. Arthur C. Clarke was totally ahead of his time.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the way people I've talked to in the IA field is this is how they're describing it. And they're saying it's no longer this, it's how I feel. And it's a feeling. They get the sense of feeling with these in the artificial realm of it now.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, because I think one of the challenges that people have with quantum computing is that we as humans, right, we tend to live in a linear world, right? There's a time associated with everything. You get up in the morning, you make your coffee, you do your stuff, right? You come here, we get to do our Dash of Cyber episode, all that kind of stuff, and then you move on and do other things, right? So it's very linear. But in quantum computing, it's not linear. It is very and that's I think the part that really is kind of mind-boggling, which goes to your posit that when we get to really that we're getting to quantum computing, but when we get to quantum computing where you start to introduce the construct of machine learning and artificial intelligence, where that's where we start to get down that road that the science fiction of a machine that has some sort of limited degree or true sentience, right? Where it says, hey, I don't want to work today because I don't feel so good. Because in linear processors, you don't get that, right? You get a bunch of algorithms put together, but now in quantum, right now you have all those potential states that can create those entanglements and tie everything together and potentially create that light bulb moment for the computer itself. And that I think is, truly amazing, but also truly scary at the same time, because then we go down an entirely different ethical conversation with, how do you, can we create life forms that way? And it gets really weird. And now we're doing Star Trek and stuff, and it's very fascinating.
The aspect that I was talking to a friend of mine, a colleague, and the other day is we were talking about if we took AI and trained it to just hack and teach it nothing abilities but to hack on the quantum level, that quantum computer becomes a cybersecurity risk where it goes out and just hounds things, collects things, and says, okay, look, now I can control your network. What more do you want me to do? And so now you come into that aspect of that, what you're saying. The whole inside of it, and then you just take that IA and train it to do one thing. You'll be unstoppable. And more people are writing about how AI and quantum is literally going to change the medical world, the cyber world, and even, you can say the whole world, but those are the two biggest areas that they're going to see. One, I can put my blood in, they can run tests on it. The doctor can look at it right there and tell me if it's going to work, if it's not going to work, if I'm going to have a reaction before I even leave the hospital. And now I'm teaching quantum computers how to hack or become, hey, let's have a conversation. And so now I'm doing social engineering over the phone, and you don't even know it because you think it's this person. So it's the evolution is there. And we just have to prepare ourselves for it and learn how to protect against it.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke about something just before, Brad, you brought that. There is no time consideration because it's a state thing. And I did read in one of the links that I shared above in the comments that there is also no space consideration, and that quantum capability will allow to do the replication without any geographic limitation. So it was like kind of, you can keep quantum states across distance, and you could have one on the moon that could be kept in sync, like a live backup, and that would be like instantaneous. I didn't get exactly how, but do you see that kind of consideration about the distance going out of the equation? And I guess that's linked to the quantum network capabilities, or how do you transfer a state from a location to another one? Does it matter? I mean, that was a quick read on my end, but they kind of said like, oh, we can have a backup stuff running on the moon, and it's gonna be kept in sync. I was like, what? So is that something you saw?
So that is theoretically that they're trying to work through and talk through. It would be ultimately the quantum networking. They're trying to do. I read an article the other day. They're trying to do quantum. What is it called when you go from one place to another place? Teleportation.
Yes. I read that stuff. They did say they did take a qubit from point A and put it on point B. Yeah,
and then turn around and moved it to point C and then brought it back to point A. And so if your teleportation qubits, your whole network then of your quantum, it's just expanded. You take that theory of the 1, now I can move 2, now I can move 4. And so you're taking that same concept in teleportation, even though it's probably just bringing, one up and it's got the key information to another point. You're bringing it up, you're transferring it over one to things like that. But you could do that over great distance. They've talked that once it's completed, you could do it from the Earth to the moon to another planet back to Earth. And it would just, that quantum information would be just transferred around.
That was pretty deep teleportation, but I was just going to say, if you've got infinite states between 0 and 1, then you don't really need a lot of bandwidth to transfer stuff around, right?
No, you don't.
But is it like really transferring stuff, or is it like replicating the state of?
So the paper I read, it's right now they're doing the replication of states. They are saying eventually they are going to be able to take one from things. We have already been able to transfer one atom to the moon and back. That's actually been done. The exact same atom went to the moon and then came back. I've got to find that article if you want to read it. But then at the same time, if you can take an atom, you're already at the qubit level. What's the difference? How do we get from 1 to 2? How do we get 2 to 4? And that's the next thing. But the article we were reading about is just talking about how this quantum computer falls over, this one picks up using the exact same technology, exact same information that was in the other one.
So when it does that, basically it does it, but we don't have the let's say the modulation capability of transforming matter, like human people, into data and then replicate it and then remodulate it.
If we can get to that point, Alexander, we can then all like get together in person and do our thing around the campfire, and it would be really cool. But
so, have you not seen the show Upload yet? We are already doing that.
Wow. So here's a question though. So obviously, we like, our favorite topic is all things cybersecurity.
Yes.
And I think the good news today is that there's not a lot of these things around. Right. And that we know of. Right. But I mean, let's talk the US. We know Google, IBM, there's a couple of other places, the national labs, and they've got quantum computers and they're doing experimentation and work and they're fairly controlled. At what point, do Brad and Alexandra and Rod get to buy one of these things and park it on our desktop and crack 256 hashes? That's what I want to know, right? Because that's really where the rubber meets the road from a security perspective, is if these things can get into the hands of the bad guys, right? Then we have a much more challenging problem on our hands than we have currently right now, because we've got the theoretical that yes, quantum computing is going to be able to break current encryption standards eventually, right?
Yes.
And all the harvesting stuff becomes a thing. But it's that proliferation thing. What's your opinion, John, on how we're going to see proliferation of these things, over time?
So I will say we've actually started seeing this.
Oh, great. Awesome.
So, Dale, so I
I'm
recently
going to
read
Micro Center. I'm going to buy myself a quantum computer. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so Dell has actually started looking and working with a couple different companies to create a hybrid where it can do quantum processing with a standard computer,
Wow.
mixing two motherboards on the same thing. Now, this is just them theory. So if they're looking at how to do it, somebody's already brought it. Let's do this. And, we're in the R&D process. So technically, I do feel that we're already there. I also feel that this is something we're going to see probably within the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to see more and more quantum computers, and they're going to get smaller and big and faster. But for everyday home person to have one, you're probably not going to see it, I would say, within my lifetime. Now, you can go rent space, and then that becomes an issue. But I would say that's where we're going to see businesses buying somebody like Facebook or, large businesses like that are going to buy them and set them up and process their stuff because, they collect the data, they own the data, they can do whatever they want with it. But, as far as everyday home use, you're probably not going to see one probably within my lifetime. But then, who knows? We could come out one day and somebody comes out and creates this brand new chip and it expedites this. I mean, the I series for Intel was expedited because one person found a new way of formatting it and it just changed literally within 2 years. So imagine somebody that's 13, 14 years old now says, hey, look, I can do this, brings it up to, one of these people, and it changes the world. So
I think that will be hidden for a while because we are not fully aware of the extent of the capabilities, in regard to breaking encryption. I think about cryptocurrencies, blockchain. And if that's proven to be broken or can be altered by quantum computing, that is quite fast enough to deconstruct and reconstruct one, maintaining some kind of integrity. I mean, all these NFTs, crypto stuff, this is zero.
It's gone to nothing.
And
there's
so, yeah.
There's hits and misses. So some people say cryptocurrency is safe. Some people say it's not. It's, we won't know until it's actually rolled out and trying. They are running it through, like National Labs is running their tests, IBM's running their tests, Google's out there making everybody scared to death. So, I mean, it is. And so you see that. But at the same time, it doesn't matter what you have now. It's how you adapt and protect for the future. If everybody stays on 128 and that's all you go to, you're never going to prepare. So you've got to learn to grow, go to the next level, increase it. And so Bitcoin's doing the same thing. They're doing new technologies. They're testing new algorithms with new keys and stuff. So it's the evolution for them is changing as quickly as the evolution for us. Blockchain's becoming the same way. Blockchain can be broke. I know we've all read articles about people jailbreaking, hacking blockchains, because and things. And then what did they do? They found the hack. They elevate it to the next level. And it's the same thing. Quantum computers are next level. That means our next security. With us at American Binary, we have quantum safe connectivity. We have quantum safe communications. We have our Ghostway product where you can call, text, and send messages, and they're quantum safe. You can do a VPN technology on that. And those are all the new levels that as technology develops with this, we are going to need for the future.
I do hope that banks and all sensitive, like military critical assets and all the transaction world that actually make our world work today are going
Listening.
to be catching up, because they are known, for a lot of how do you say that, compliance requirements that
So-
slow their motion, toward new technology and stuff. So in a way, it's good because it does enforce security control. But
So-
yeah, go ahead.
So on that aspect, and I'm sorry to interject you, the White House has already ejected 3 letters stating that, hey, you need to find out everybody within DOD, NSA, FBI, CIA, all those special people. They have to start looking at post-quantum encryption and quantum safe encryptions. They've actually released funding to start developing more into this area because it's become a major news. It's become a major talk about. It's become a security risk. And people have announced that quantum attacks have already started. I have seen it on LinkedIn posts that they state they have been attacked by quantum computers. They have been attacked by a quantum device. And I think some of it is smoke and mirrors to drive the panic. But I think at the same time, there you go. Somebody else out there is trying to test. And so, you can't do anything without tests to know if it really works or not. So I see both sides of the house, and I know that there is being pushed for companies to upgrade to quantum safe technologies.
So I was going to say 2 things. So one, before quantum, you've got like data centers full of GPUs that are mining Bitcoin, but can also break any encryption that you want, right? So before quantum, there's you look at some of these Chinese data centers that are just 4 stories high and football field wide, full of GPUs, right? How many gigaflops or bazillion flops are in there? And we're worried about quantum computers. Like, that's the least of our worries, I think. But on the quantum side, we've been focused on the negative, right? So the bad guys are going to use it against us. But the random, there's true random in quantum, so you can get really true crypto, right? So
Yes.
the protection side should be huge as well too. And then the capability for machine learning. And Brad was talking about the parallelism and kind of the multidimensional, right? So whereas machine learning is now doing what it knows, you can probably get to a point where it can start finding novel stuff, right? Which I think is on. If you look at the good guy side of the equation, those are 2 really good things that it can bring to the table.
Well, and not just only that, look in the medical field. Quantum can develop a next drug. It can be used to help to cure cancer, or at least parts of cancer. It can be used to create new and exciting stuff that we have out there. So quantum itself is not just a bad thing. There's a lot of good behind it. Finding out where issues rely and how to fix them, finding out the ability to have a better communications level on personal aspects or with family or friends, and the instantaneously that it provides. That's all out there, and that's wonderful. I mean, even in our houses, could you imagine if we all had a quantum processor in our house and we needed to do something, or like my wife has a rare form of MS. There's only 10 people in the world that has her form of MS. And, we had a quantum computer. We could put her whole medical stuff there, and it could be regulated day in and day out for her ability. And it can talk to the doctors and get what it needs and come right back without us having to, go through a computer and wait for it to process. It would actually have the live feed there. So there's a lot out there that quantum computers are going to save us on. And there's a lot of scary things. Everything that comes out good is going to come out bad too.
I agree. When you say about live connection and live feed on medical choice, I'm like, they try to do that now with medical stuff, and we see that it is hacked all over the place. So I hope that the idea of security and privacy by design is going to be from the start with the quantum side of things. And we are not going to assume that this is fine. Also, because we don't know the capabilities of the other countries and foreigners. So I guess the rush is like a lot of spying in that, and this is like evolving together. But just out of being careful, we should consider that it might be a little bit in advance. So when we start to connect sensitive devices such as the medical control, medication regulation, and all that stuff, we should, find a way to do it. So and that brings the thing, internet. This is bytes, So do we pipe quantum communication on top of that, or do we need a new internet? Or given there is no geographical regulation, will we come with a new protocol or new layer, or the transportation of the data? I'm wondering, because now we just piled up over IPv4.
This
We
will be
didn't
layer
even
Z.
get IPv6.
We're gonna be it'll be layer Z, Alexandra.
Yeah.
Because it's totally random, and why not?
So a lot of people I've talked to said we will learn a lot of new protocols. We will learn a lot of new layers of technology in this, because you're not just dealing with a particular layer to things. You could have mesh layers to communicate. You could have individual layers to communicate. You could have, atomic atom here versus atomic atom in, North Dakota to create your communications links because it's using the different parts of the atoms. There, we're going to see several variety of new protocols come out. Now, will we see it fast in a hurry? I would say we will start seeing a lot more next year than we will this year, just because everything is so scary now that until people start coming out with and talking with it and layering with it, then it will go that way. Because you always scare people to death, and then you have to find nature is you have to find the good in it, because everybody talks about the bad all the time. And so that's how we're going to see it.
We're looking at you, Alexandra.
He hasn't talked bad about me yet. So
No, that's fine.
So one of the things you mentioned, John, and I really do like the term quantum safe, not quantum proof, right? Because again, we want to get away from snake oil salesmen. But one of the challenges in our industry, and I know this is near and dear to Rob's heart, is the fact that we're just terrible when it comes to life cycle planning. And so the question would be is when we think about getting to the point where we have, capabilities that are quantum safe, what is that timeline that companies should be looking towards? Because obviously large entities, right, they're probably going to have a budget, they're going to figure this out. But when we get down to small and mid-sized businesses getting to quantum safe, it's probably a pretty heavy lift in the next 5 years. But is it, should they be quantum safe, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What is that sort of that ballpark number? Because folks have to plan for this. They have to budget for that, and that's always a big challenge in our industry.
And what does quantum safe mean?
Yes, that too.
Okay. So quantum safe means your data is protected against a quantum attack for a period of time. Because of the developments and how rapidly quantums changes, you can never make anything quantum proof. So if you write what we write today, we write our algorithms are against quantum computers that are out there today. If one is developed in 5-10 years, that's 300 qubits, that's going to dictate differently than what we wrote 5 or 6 when we were writing against 200 or 300 in that aspect of qubits, because you have so many tons more qubits that it can process all that data quicker, faster, and stronger. Instead of just put 8 qubits against a thing, you can put 16 or 32 qubits against 1 bit. So, it changes the aspect of it. But we're protecting you. Quantum safe is for the term of endurement, not for the lifetime. Okay, so let's be honest with you. If you were quantum proof, it would last your entire lifetime. Quantum safe means we're going to get you between now next 15, 20 years, now between the next 15, 30 years, however you want to write it, however you feel comfortable. And it's like anything else, we have to take what we have today. We have to make sure it's compliant for tomorrow. So businesses that are looking at today, their biggest threat, as we've talked about at the beginning, is going to be harvest attacks. Collect the data now, decrypt it later. These are you can start protecting against that now. We do that every day. We sell and we produce quantum safe encryption for harvest attacking for your data. And we're working on a true data at rest quantum safe technology. That quantum safe, go ahead.
Yeah, you said we can only achieve that hope for 15 to 20 years. even doing that. So
you're never going to be proof, but you cannot guarantee anything the lifetime of anybody. So if you plan 10, 15 years down the road, you're buying your quantum stuff now. You're planning down 10 to 15 down years. When you come back, there's going to be, just like every evolution, you had 128, you had 256, you had, the evolutions. Yeah. Quantum safe technology is going to do the same thing. It's going to come out right now. Can only be based on what we have today. So we have a quantum computer that's only got 250 qubits on it. That randomization is massively huge. But as soon as somebody comes out, like IBM says, they're going to produce a 4,000 qubit machine, that same randomness is still going to be valid, but it's not going to take you to the next level. So then you have to write your new scripts, your new technology against the 4,000 aspect instead of the 250 aspect. So now you have a greater form of randomization. You have a greater form of protection. You have a greater form of logs. And so there's what I'm saying. I don't tell people you have to do it in 5 years, 10 years, or 15. I'm telling you that if you're moving to quantum safe technology, you're safe comfortably for the next, 10, 15, 20 years. But, at the next evolution of quantum computing, you have to understand there's a change here, just like we changed from RSA or AES 128 to AES 256. We changed the algorithm. We changed the protection. Quantum's going to do the same thing. We still use it to protect you. We're just going to protect you now at a different level in that aspect.
So that means that we have to embed governance into the security management protection. That means that we must make the data obsolete before we reach that replay capability. So that means that we cannot build or store or transfer sensitive information that will still be valid in more than the protection expectancy in a way. So that's a big shift, because I don't think this is something that exists right now. Making sure that the information we transmitted 10 years ago, 15 years ago is now totally unusable because it's no longer valid. Something like that.
So the aspect I use with the people when I talk to people, take your debit card. Just think about your debit card right now. If I were to put all our debit cards in the database and encrypt it, and I pull that encryption off there, what are the chances are in the next year your debit card's still going to be valid? It's because 90% chance.
Yeah.
Because your banks only rotate your cards out every 4 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Data is held longer than that. Data is held up to 10 years in some cases. So if you're going to do your quantum safe technology, we're going to push you to the 10, 15, 20 years of safeness. So that way that data has had a time to expire. And if it does get, something happens to that, because, the biggest threat isn't somebody breaking it right now. The biggest threat is somebody decrypting it and exposing it.
Yeah.
So if we can protect you, to that till that data is expired, then your next evolution is when you get your next set of data, it's going to be protected from that evolution on to the next.
So that's about 90% of the data is going to be fine with that kind of range. But my spirit is all about, nuclear warhead, missile launchers. No, but this is what it is.
Well, but you make a really good point, Alexander, because and I really like to go back to something that John said earlier, right? We're in the 1980s with quantum computing from an equivalency perspective ish. I mean, it's probably it's the same but different. In the 1980s, right, we weren't having these discussions. Right, we weren't talking about, oh my gosh, encryption and data, because we were going to live in this utopia where the internet was going to be great and everybody was just there and happy and sharing data, and that's why we didn't have shadow files with Linux when it first came out. But the bottom line is that we should, I would hope, anyways. I know hope's not a method, but I would hope that we learn some of the lessons right? And the stumbles that we had along the way with linear computing, and then say, you know what, let's as we are building these things, let's have the conversations about what does it mean to have data stored or quantum safe, right? What does it mean from a governance perspective, right? If we're talking about a qubit going from one place to another place, what does all that mean, right? What does that mean from how to random number generation, encryption, communications, networking, right? This is like, it's like, instead of trying to apply what we already know, let's honestly have a conversation about what does it mean to do that in a quantum world, so that we actually have thought about this before we're back here 20 years from now, guys, and we're having a different conversation, but we're like going, man, that quantum cloud thing really sucks because we didn't come up with governance.
And we really need to have those conversations, and it needs to be brought up. And that is something I do talk about with businesses, is there is no governance, there is no regulatories, there's nothing. But at the same time, there are things they can do at the small business, medium business, and large business to incorporate it themselves. And you don't push, I feel, so this is my personal opinion, you don't put your cybersecurity people doing regular security, everyday cybersecurity we know and love, and doing quantum security together. You need two separate teams. Wow. And the reason I say that is because we're still going to have regular attacks every single day. They still need to study that. They still need to understand that. But you need a team over here that understands the quantum side of it that can help you with are they going to overlap? Quite a bit, yes. But at one point in time, you have to have the distinguished where these people understand this form of technology, these people understand this form of technology, and then they can protect the business better, because you're not just protecting about one aspect anymore. Now you got to protect it too. And that's just from the bits and qubits, not including the users that you have that are going to be integrated into this.
Well, and it goes down, John. I think this is an important point. I know we're getting close to our stop point here, and this has been a fabulous conversation. But I will tell you that this all comes down to resources, right? You just said something that is super important here, that you got to plan for it. You got to have you're going to have to pay to get people trained and get smart on this, right? Yes. You're going to have potentially have different parts of your cybersecurity team. One's focused on linear, one's focused on quantum, right? And, from a budgetary aspect, whether it's, government to private industry to, commercial manufacturing, any of the industry verticals, they're not thinking about this right now. Well, no. Right. And again, we don't have enough resources as it is. And we want to say all this automation and all this technology is making it easier for everybody. Yeah. Yet it's not. It's like, no. We still need people that can run all this stuff. Goodness forbid if we ever have like quote unquote open source quantum computing, they're going to say, hey, we don't need to pay for a license for that anymore. We're good. Right? We're going to be like, no. You still got to train people.
Oh boy. When you brought that stuff, we fight today in SMBs that no, security is not IT. IT need to bring security. And I picture myself, it's down. Bring the IT. It's a security. Bring the security. It's quantum based. Bring the quantum team. Fire! Oh boy! I think, guys,
you need a bunker after that. Just
find a bunker.
Wow! That was amazing. Go ahead, John. We're gonna wrap up. So, all of you, if you want a final word, maybe we let John finish, but Rod first.
Hashtag bunker. When quantum comes, we all have to hide.
Yeah, because the nuclear stuff is going to be hacked by someone.
I'll tell you, from my side of the house, I've learned that even if I have my aluminum foil hat on, right, the quantum computer is just going to see through it. So I need to be concerned there. But I also think that there's just like everything else in technology, right? It's good or bad, right? And it's not, the technology isn't good or bad, it's the intent, right? So if you use a computer a quantum computer and your intent is bad, then you're doing bad guy threat actor stuff. If you're using it to discover the next, the cure for cancer, or managing, a disease, or working on that side of stuff, there's good stuff to it as well. And we have to keep that in mind. It's no different than any other technology we have there. It's just another technology we have to put into our need, or our list of things we need to learn.
I saw Brad, you did inspire me. The next phishing is going to be, I saw you quantum nude on the internet, and it's going to come as a hologram. And if you don't send me a Qubit coin now, that's not going to work.
Wow.
And John, final word. Thanks a lot for all the insightful information.
Absolutely.
What would be a final take?
Quantum is not as scary as you think. There's a lot of fun to come with it. I'm here to help you every step of the way. And I thank you guys very much for letting me join. I hope we do this again, because I think there's still so much we haven't even discussed, and we can keep going. But yeah, I'm here to help if you guys have anything. Even to our listeners, if you have questions or lost or confused, let me know, and I will help you get the right information and the right guidance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
You will find John profile linked in the event as a speaker, so you can find him and reach out to him. I'm really happy you came on that. I'm happy there are some people working on it, because we are a passive reader, and I'm happy that you come with something. Hopefully, we're gonna see more of this in the future. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Rod. We're gonna wrap up. Amazing time as usual.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.